So first and foremost, Kenny, a big aloha, brother, and welcome to the show and our series that we're doing, Off the Road.
Hey, thanks, man. Thanks for having me on.
You are welcome. And before we get into this first ever live DVD from you and your first live project in a decade, too, let's go back to the tour it was recorded on. Now, the new release was recorded in November 2019 before the pandemic, but that tour continued into 2020 for the Traveler album. So take us back, and if you can, try to tell it in story form and walk us through when you first remember starting to hear about the pandemic and how it began to impact your tour that you were on, eventually halting it.
Well, I mean, we were on the road, and this live DVD was recorded, I think, in our second trip over to Europe that year. And everything, none of it was happening at this point, and it wasn't until I think this was November of 2019 when we recorded this show. And then we came home after that for the holidays. And we did a blues cruise out in the Caribbean in January. And I think you were just kind of starting to hear about it then, but we went ahead. There was nothing was stopping the cruises, I don't think. We did that. And then after that, we actually made a trip right at the end of February to play a blues festival in India, in Mumbai. And that was when you first started seeing a few people walking around the airport showing up with masks and stuff. And you were like, huh. And we got to customs in India and we were clearing customs, and all the people working at the border there had masks on. And that's when you're like, wow, this is different. But it wasn't. We went there, we came back home, made it back to the US, and there was still a lot of uncertainty. Like really nobody had a full grasp on, what to expect or what this might turn into. I don't think anybody expected, what has actually happened, so it was interesting in retrospect, the whole thing. I just can't wait for us to be able to put all this behind us and look back on it as something that we all went through and made it to the other side,
Well, let's hope. And certainly for a lot of folks, unfortunately, they're either not going to make it through it, or they've got an experience that, as you can imagine, because you've got loved ones and a whole bunch of kids that I know you love dearly. You can imagine what it's like for folks who have relatives that they've lost and stuff. And on the tour, where were you exactly, brother? When because from reading about it from your press guy, it said the tour was halted. Where exactly were you when they pulled the plug on it?
So we had just come back. From India, and I had a surgery scheduled, which I never had a surgery before, but I had a surgery that I had done right. I think it was like March 4th or something. It was like the first week of March, which again was very lucky timing because it wasn't very long after that they started shutting down all, unnecessary. Well, I mean, it was necessary, but it wasn't like a life or death surgery. So
Sure.
I think it would not have happened if it was a week or two later. So anyways, I went in to do that, and, they had all the warnings up in the hospital. If you have been, if you traveled to China or these places lately, or if you have any of these symptoms, notify someone immediately. Anyway, so I had the surgery, and I had planned, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks of recovery, and then we were supposed to hit the road again. And so I was recovering from my surgery as things were just beginning, as the virus was beginning to spread around our country and start exploding, and then the lockdown started happening. And so we just kind of waited and waited to see what was going to happen, and until it became clear that everybody's going home and nobody's going to be allowed to play live music. And we kept rescheduling shows, and then we would get close to those dates, where the shows had been rescheduled. And then you find out, because everybody's hoping that there'd be some miracle, and then maybe they would open things back up and this thing would, something would happen and we'd be able to go back to work. And then they're like, oh, it's not going to happen. So then you reschedule it. It's just been a perpetual state of rescheduling the tour over and over and over again.
Do you have, and that's a great, and that's so many people, almost every single guest we've had on has said exactly that sort of rap. But where does it stand now in terms of, do you have an idea? Is it going to happen? Is there a resumption, or is it just completely like you're just going to wait, or what's the status?
Nobody knows. Nobody can give anybody any kind of answers. I mean, in my opinion, I think the people in our industry will be the last people to go back to work. just because it involves large gatherings
Sure.
of people. And but nobody can even say when that's going to be. I mean, every time you get somebody making a projection, it's just a guess. Like, they're just guessing. And then the guesses keep getting pushed further and further out, as the days go by. So, I mean, nobody really has any clue. If I told you anything right now, it'd be worthless information, because I don't know. I don't know. They don't know. Nobody knows. And, the one thing we all do know is that we just would like things, to be able to have the opportunity to play music. And I think the fans would like the opportunity to be able to safely go back and enjoy live music again,
And so they're not even tentative dates at this point. There's nothing. You're just waiting until at some point in the future to.
Well, no, they keep, like I said, they keep rescheduling them, because you want to be prepared, right? Like,
I get it.
The moment that they do give people the green light, and the fans are comfortable to show up, you want to be there, and so we do keep rescheduling them, and there are new dates that that we acquire and that we put on the books.
But they do what you said. They're perpetually, you've explained it really well. So then eventually when you get close to them, if they're not going to happen, they'll get bumped to a future date. So you'll always have dates ready. And then it's just a matter of if you get the clearance. I get it. I mean, that's a good explanation that gives a little bit of insight to how the booking agents must have to keep working. I mean, they're still working through this to try to figure it out. And
hey, let me tell you what, those guys, they've been working nonstop on this, and none of them have gotten paid because nobody's been doing any of these shows.
Right.
So these booking agents are working their butts off, and they have yet to make any money off of all the work they've done, because nobody's, hardly anybody's been able to do any shows of any real significance, Yeah,
and it's been that kind of thing for so many kinds of folks. And when I think of the music, especially looking at the Straight to You Live new DVD and the packaging for this thing, when you see some names of other artists, like, because I know you're a gigantic fan and somebody who appreciates music and has really studied it, actually, when it comes to so many of the great blues artists. I think about some of the very popular and talented folks who passed away. I wonder if you were a fan of or ever got to see Manu Dibango, John Prine, Ellis Marsalis, father of Wynton and Branford and Del Feo. Also Adam Schlesinger, Fountains of Wayne. Toots Hibbert of Toots and the Maytals, one of the all-time most important reggae artists, bar none. We lost all of them to COVID. Have you ever seen any of those guys? Were you fans of any of them? Or have you lost anyone that you want to share?
Well, yes, I've seen a number of those guys, and as a matter of fact, Ellis Marsalis, I've known him since I was like 13 years old. So he was really. My dad knew him, and they were on the Louisiana State Music Commission together back when I was a kid. And Ellis was like one of the guys that early on in my life, when I was even just barely considering, pursuing music, he was one of the guys that encouraged me the most, So, I mean, all those people, I mean, anybody who's died is a significant loss. Like, just because a lot of people recognize those names doesn't make them any more significant of a loss than any other person. We're all people, we're all living this life together. And nobody wants to lose anybody. I've had a number of friends and family members that have come down with it, but thankfully I haven't lost anybody directly close to me as a result of it yet, and hopefully, like I said, hopefully this thing will round the corner at some point and we won't be having to have these kinds of conversations.
No, I hope not. But what a great way. And we've heard so many tributes to Ellis Marsalis, though, from folks who, like John Schofield, who was with George Duke and went and played for a bunch of Ellis's kids one time at his school in the mid-'70s, to just the guest, a few guests before you. We had George Benson on. And he was talking about Ellis bringing Wynton and Branford when they were little kids to see George in some park down there. And then you come up with this, in Hawaii we call it chicken skin, when you have like a cool story that kind of gives you chills. You remember first meeting him as a little kid?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And he was such a sweet guy. Like, I mean, obviously I only have my own experience to draw from, but I've never met anybody had a bad thing to say about him. And he was such a really sweet, soft-spoken dude, carried a lot of weight. When he opened his mouth, it was heavy. You know what I mean? He always had something of real weight and significance to say. And like I said, he was very encouraging to me, you know, as a kid. You know, he just, you know, made me feel like when I had little conversations with him here and there, he made me feel like, you know, maybe I could make something out of myself with music, you know, and that's really important. Left a big impression on me.
That's fantastic. That's a great, and you pay great tribute to him. And final question before we turn to the record. Not long after 2020 became so taken over by the pandemic, we also had the Black Lives Matter police reform movement gain international steam following the killing of George Floyd. And as a blues musician yourself, knowing some of your musical heroes who you've studied up close too, in a way very, very few other musicians have, how have you been touched by this and speak from the heart?
Well, look, for me, most of my heroes, musical heroes, definitely are Black people. And I grew up in a community when I was a kid where, you know, I was like the only white guy that lived on the block, right? All my friends are Black people. All my heroes are Black people. I mean, I play music that was created by the, you know, African American community, and it's, you know, given me an opportunity, you know, to have a career doing what I do. And so, you know, I love people. I love all people. I mean, I don't get into politics. Like, I stay away from political. Like, if I'm being brutally honest with you, I feel like, you know, musicians, like, people want to hear me play music. They don't want to hear me tell them what to think or, you know, preach about what my political beliefs are. Like, because politics, in my opinion, divides people, and music is meant to bring people together. So generally, I don't speak on matters of politics, but as a matter of, like, from one human being to another, I reserve judgment. I try and reserve judgment on people in all cases, because I don't feel like it's my place to judge. But if I am to pass judgment or have an opinion on somebody, I do it based on my own personal experience with that individual and based on their character and my interactions with them, and absolutely never on their appearance, whether it's their skin color or anything, you know, that has to do with anything like that.
Yeah, it's a good answer. And I would keep in mind Black Lives Matter is not really, only to some is it a political issue. It's more of a human rights thing to most.
Well, and I believe, you know, I mean, in our country, you know, it says all men are created equal. I think it's as simple as that, and it should be. But you have to admit that as soon as that subject comes up, it's anything that has been in any way brought up as a political talking point that has had anything to do with the election or anything like that, it becomes a real sensitive subject with somebody.
Right.
And I just don't get into politics. I'm not a politician. I don't claim to be a politician.
No, you're a fine blues.
It's not my bag. You know?
I know it's not, brother. But you gave a nice answer, and I appreciate it. And you're a fine guitar player, and you know, one of the things, certainly, as you were saying, being influenced by all that great African American music and basically the blues, which you've been. Really, like I said, very few people have gotten the chance to get up close to some of the originators of the form and some of the greatest people who've ever done it, and then study them, work with them, get to really kind of keep a close eye on exactly what they do. And when I look at this record, this is you playing that stuff live on stage, the Traveler album, and not only recorded, it's a live DVD and a new live album that you've got here, but you did it at a famous European establishment, the Rock Palace German TV show, which is explain how you ended up doing this, which is, for a lot of music fans, this is a great source of cool live videos.
Yeah, over in Europe, that's a really prestigious organization. It's a real big show that they do, and you know, it's usually high profile artists that are, you know, part of that program. And so we were asked to you know, to be on the program, and they came out to film one of our shows. And you know, we basically, you know, they were there filming. We always have our own audio recording that happens every night. So you know, we had the film crew was there, my audio crew was doing their thing, and the band, you know, was kind of hitting on all cylinders. I mean, we were really like this was, you know, the whole tour was rocking, but like this was at a exceptional point in the tour. Like, we felt that night that we, you know, put on a really good show. And so then we ended up watching the video back, and you know, I really enjoyed the camera work, because the way the camera crew approached it, it wasn't like, most guitar videos, like when you have a live music video of a guitar player, it's, traditionally you're going to see like 98% of the time you're watching the guy playing guitar or close-ups of his hands and things like that. And every once in a while you get kind of a glimpse of what everybody else is doing. But there was a really inclusive vibe in the camera work, where you really, every guy in the band is featured. Even in each moment of the song, they're paying attention, and they're letting the listener and the viewer really see who's playing what and what's going down. And it's a real kind of band approach to the actual camera work. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I thought the camera work was great. The audio, we mixed it and mastered it, and so it's top notch. And at the end of the day, we thought, you know what? Our fans have been asking for years and years for us to put out a live DVD. We've actually never done it. We've only ever put out one live album. So, and in light of recent developments and the fact that we can't go and play music for everybody, we've given them an opportunity to experience it in the comfort of their own home. So I thought the timing was probably, as good as it ever could be.
Right, there you go. That's a good way of looking at it for sure on a number of fronts. Now, was this, Kenny, the same show in terms of the set list that you had been doing throughout the tour, or did you adjust the set list for this gig? And do you adjust the set list night to night, or do you have a specific routine of songs you like to knock out?
So when we do a tour, I'll create a primary set list, and then I'll create 2 alternate set lists. So we have a total of 3 with variations, right? With alternate songs sprinkled throughout each. And then sometimes, I can just go on right off script, like on stage, and start calling out different songs on the fly. But this particular performance, it was the core set list of the tour. So it's likely that if you came and saw us on, multiple parts of this tour or whatever, that you probably saw us perform this exact set list,
And when you toured some wild places. You were dropping some of those earlier in our conversation. You said India is one of the places that you got to go. Now, was that your first time getting to play there, or had you done that before?
I'd actually never been to India before. That was really cool and enlightening, and it was a great experience. I'm really grateful to have been able to go over there, and I certainly look forward to going back again. I mean, really, it's a lot of history and a lot of culture over there.
And so that was a blues fest or something. Now, I guess I ask because comparing from the DVD to the set list you did there, was that something where you brought out unusual things, or was that more of the core? I'm just guessing as I'm talking. Maybe that's, again, where you want to do the core stuff because it's a new place.
Well, so when we go into a place like that where we've never been, I probably, I don't remember. I'd have to pull up the set list to see if I made any changes, but I probably was sticking to what I thought was, the closest thing to a guarantee to our best stage performance,
Sure.
Because we were in front of an entire room full of people that had never seen us before. So you want to give them the best impression possible.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And what's a favorite memory from being there as part of your tour? What was the cool thing that you got to do while you were there that sticks out, makes you smile in terms of your memories from being in India?
Well, I'm just walking out, exploring, the city and walking, the streets, amongst the people there, and seeing, the spirit of the city that we were in, and the people around there. And then also the cuisine. I mean, I'm a big food person, man. So I love experiencing authentic. I mean, I've been eating Indian food my whole life, right? But okay, we're in India, so this is the real, this is authentic, right? And so getting to experience that. And then we met up with a friend of mine from back home, knew a guy that actually was from there and who was actually going to be in town while we were there. And we met up with him and his wife, and they took us, on a trip, sightseeing into this island, into these historic caves. And, so it was really great. I mean, we just
Nice.
had an all around fantastic experience there.
That is super huge. Well, I love Indian food too. Chicken sag's one of my favorite. Korma is one of my favorites. Aloo gobi, all kinds of stuff. So, that's cool that when I saw that in your press kit, I was like, wow. And that's Mumbai was the city again that you were doing this
Yeah.
in.
That's right.
And the show ends with this burning cover of Jimi Hendrix's Voodoo Child. It makes me think of a story that I had heard about you, and that is that, and you'll correct me, hopefully I don't have it wrong, but once you played Jimmy Fallon's show and got to use the same guitar Hendrix played at Woodstock, is that true? And if it is, how'd you get that opportunity?
Yeah, that was that was cool, man. That was probably like, I was literally living the dream of every guitar player on the face of the planet in that moment, and I got to know Paul Allen, who was the co-creator of Microsoft with Bill Gates, right? And we just recently lost Paul. He just passed away about a year or two ago, and so anyways, but I was kind of friends with him, and he owned that guitar amongst many other really cool things and really cool guitars. And so, I would go up and play these events at his museum in Seattle. And they brought out a Les Paul one time that Jimi Hendrix owned and let me play it. and I really I was like, you sure you want me to play this thing? And they're like, yeah, go ahead. I was like, because I play really hard. Like, I don't really hold back. And they're like, go for it, man. So I played that Les Paul that night. And I don't know. I think, whatever happened, they liked what they heard or they liked what they saw. And then the next thing the idea was hatched on their behalf that they would fly Hendrix's Woodstock Strat out to New York for me to play on the Jimmy Fallon show. And then I played it later that night at the Beacon Theater on stage as well.
For the whole show at the Beacon or just one bit or?
Well, so that was the Experience Hendrix tour. So it was like a revolving
of all the guests
roster of like 12 different artists, and so every artist had a certain amount of time on the stage, and so I played it for about half of my time on the stage. At a certain point, I just didn't want to beat it up too hard.
That is so cool, and when you're, it kind of makes me think when you think about like the stuff you're talking about and these artists. And early on, you mentioned that it had been maybe your father and his connections that brought you in touch with Ellis Marsalis. Your dad was, from what I read, a radio personality, a huge music fan, and an occasional concert promoter. And really, when you think of Hendrix and your love of that, is it also true that your dad promoted a Stevie Ray Vaughan concert, and when you were really, really young, you got to actually meet him?
Yeah, man, I was 7 years old, and my dad, was doing this festival called the Louisiana Music Festival. It's like an annual thing that he did for several years. And that particular year, he booked Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble to headline. And so that's how I got access to go backstage and meet Stevie, was because my dad was the promoter. But it was a life-changing experience for me. I mean, like, I was already interested in music, and I was very drawn to the guitar as an instrument. I had these little toy guitars that I would play with around the house. But watching him, man, I was like completely mesmerized by him and his raw power and his talent, the passion that he played with. And so, like, from that moment forward, all I wanted to do was get my hands on a real electric guitar and just try and learn how to play with that fire and that intensity that he played with,
Can you remember anything he said to you that also left an impression? Not just, obviously, the spark was made by seeing him play, but actually getting to interact with this guy who you would be compared to many times by folks. What did you remember the interaction with him?
No. So, like, I don't remember, really anything that he said that day, but I do remember the last time that I saw him, which, I went on to see him a few times and meet him. There's a photo that kind of floats around the internet that I posted up several years ago of me and my dad and Stevie all together. And in that photo, you can't see because it's cropped out, but in the bottom of the photo, because my dad has the photo hanging on his wall at his house, and you can actually see the headstock of my first Fender Stratocaster. I'm sitting there holding the guitar, and he had just autographed that guitar for me. And then we took the photo, but on the guitar, he wrote, "Hey, Kenny, just play it with all your heart, Stevie Ray Vaughan." Right. And so, and he kind of like, hinted at me, that maybe if I kept playing, maybe one day we'd be able to play together. Right. And so obviously that day never came. Though I have spent many years playing with all of his amazingly talented band members.
Yeah.
And, so that's cool. But, probably some of the best advice anybody ever gave me, he just wrote it on my guitar, and it's what I try to do every time I get on stage, is to just play with all my heart.
That is some great words of advice. And what a cool thing that your father was able to do that, and that you also have that bonding experience with your dad, which is just remarkable. And it made me think of, as we go to wrap it up, a similar thing, because I really credit your father with, as I'm sure you do, right, with introducing you so much to music, right? That's the guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my dad, obviously, I grew up around a radio station. There was always music playing. Because he was a program director and general manager, he also, like, being the program director, he came up with the playlist, like, the entire day's worth of music. And he was the boss, right? So, and he was a DJ, so he did it all. But he was always listening to the radio station, to see what it sounded like and see what needed to be changed or what could be better. And so I was surrounded by music my whole life. He had a massive record collection, like real vinyl records that I'd pull out and put on the record player and listen to and play air guitar to, or when I got my first guitar, start actually sounding out notes from listening to these records or the cassettes or whatever I had available. I mean, when CDs came out, that made it a little bit easier. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely my dad and his association with music played a tremendous role in my appreciation for music and then what was to eventually become a career for me.
Right, exactly. And that's what I say. So final question. You opened for Van Halen a few times, and when I think about the relationship that you just described, and I think of Wolfgang and obviously his father, Eddie, the late, great Eddie Van Halen. Share with us anything you can recall of those amazing experiences from what I understand, 1998, before Wolfie joined the band, but then again in 2015 on what would be their final tour, you getting to open for Van Halen.
Well, yeah, I mean, we got a lot of history with those guys. There's actually like something that really nobody knows about except their family, but my dad actually brought Valerie Bertinelli and her brothers to see Van Halen for the first time in my hometown in Shreveport. And that's when, because my dad's radio station, her dad called my dad and asked if he could get them into the show. And then, so my dad got them tickets and took them all down there and got them backstage. And that's when Valerie met Eddie for the first time.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so we have this really long history, and I'd always heard that story, and I was like, but stories can kind of take on a life of their own over the years, and I was like, did that really happen? And so, but it was really funny because on this last tour, some of Valerie's brothers like showed up to one of the gigs in like Houston, Texas, and they're like, Ken, what's up, Ken? And they're like, what your dad did, and then Wolfgang on the last show at the Hollywood Bowl went up and introduced himself to my dad and like he's like, well, I guess I owe you a thanks. And my dad's like, no, I didn't, I'm not responsible for you being here, but thank you anyways. And so, yeah, it was great. Like Eddie was great to me. He was a fantastic, he was a really great friend to me. I mean, he always like sought me out. The whole reason I was on that second tour was because he and I were texting back and forth and talking about it. And so that happened really directly between me and him. There was no booking agents involved or anything. And so, he was just a really great guy. Obviously, a tremendous, like one of the greatest guitar players of all time. It's a huge loss. My heart and my thoughts and my prayers all go out to that entire family for their loss, because I just can't even imagine. I still have my dad, but, losing a father is, a really hard thing to do. So, but yeah, I just feel honored and blessed to have known him as a person and be able to call him a friend, but also to be able to say, we were the last opening band Van Halen ever had,
right?
Which is pretty cool.
No, that's huge. And you made friends with him on the 98 tour or prior to that through your father and stuff?
Well, Eddie and I became friends in the 90s, but obviously the family connection goes much
deeper,
further back.
Yeah. But you became friends prior to that 98 tour even?
Well, I didn't know because I had never really been around him until then.
Okay, so that was when it happened on that tour, that 98 tour. That's fantastic. Well, it says a lot about you, and what a great conversation. Straight to You Live is the new DVD, CD, 2LP set from Kenny Wayne Shepherd, and fingers crossed, my brother, that you get to go back to doing stuff like that again at some point. And I really do appreciate you being part of our Off the Road series. And I hope that you had fun going through some of these great stories with us today.
Yeah, man. It's been great talking to you. I appreciate you having me on the show. Aloha, it's Kenny Wayne Shepherd. I'm stoked to be back here at HPR for the Pledge Drive. Even cooler, I got to be part of the Off the Road series. I was a guest here with my buddy Dave Lawrence. But you're tuned to a nonprofit radio station, right? So hook us up with a pledge right now. You'll be doing your part, and I thank you for it.
High fives and hugs, my brother. It was awesome, Kenny. You did a very, 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 very good interview today, and I'm extremely impressed and very grateful for your time. I want you to stay safe, my brother, and from me to you, God bless you. Really, stay safe.
Thanks, man. Have a good one.
Take care.